Lawson, my vivacious, happy wife who coaxed the bulls, the tall and muscular woman whose water broke one day in the middle of an alfalfa field, and she walked 2 miles, stopping periodically and going into labor to get to her truck and drive into town to deliver our middle child. The strong, wonderful woman who ran our ranch and managed our family with boundless energy, sat helplessly next to something her body had rejected. Ed! Then I lifted my love in my arms and carried her to the hospital. It was a bad day. The months that followed were not much better. And this isn't even my story. This is the story of my friends Noah and Mia. Next chapter? Bets! That was all I had time to say, and she started to cry. Finally, I told her, Bets, do you want to have another baby? She melted. I swear, if a man could melt. 2, she said quietly. Well, of course, pets always get 2 to keep each other company. I knew that. Mia. Noah and I worked tirelessly for 3 years to promote the store. The town where we both grew up is tiny, but there are a lot of people living on ranches and farms in the valley. Our store has hardware, tools, automotive supplies, cleaning supplies, feed, furniture, paint, plumbing supplies. Basically, you get the idea. We are an independent store, which means we have to do our own advertising and ordering. It also means we don't have to pay a franchise fee or take orders from above. We can sell what we think the community needs, not what some distant middle manager thinks we need. We decided the city deserved a store like this, and it worked. Noah ran it. I did the bookkeeping, restocked the shelves, cut fences, weighed nails, whatever needed to be done. I also kept the books for the auto repair store to supplement our income until the store could support us. The magic day came. The numbers said to make a baby, and we did. I was 3 months along and felt great. We bought a crib and a stroller. We had 2 car seats, boxes of clothes, mountains of toys. Both grandparents were ready to care for the baby. Aunts and uncles stood at the ready to welcome another member of the extended family. Cousins and siblings waited for a new playmate. My husband was bouncing with anticipation. Everything was going smoothly, and I was just putting cans of tennis balls on the shelf. Yellow, fluffy tennis balls. The most harmless things in the world. I felt something. I ran to the car. Noah was driving our truck to Connor City, 80 miles away. My calls to his cell phone went to voicemail. He was in an area where the connection doesn't work. I didn't bother leaving him a message. We promised to deliver a shipment of shingles to the contractor today. It was probably nothing. Dr. Campbell disagreed. She examined me. I froze. The world slowed down. I felt like I had headphones in my ears. It was miscarriage. Noah. I was devastated when I finally learned that Mia had lost our baby. I was driving back to town when my cell phone detected a signal and started beeping. I pulled off the road and checked my messages. There were no messages from Mia. Only a short message from Dr. Campbell's office asking me to come as soon as possible. There were no voicemails from Mia either. Only a short message from Dr. Campbell's nurse saying that my wife was in the office and I should come as soon as possible. The lack of communication from my wife threw me into a panic. I accelerated to 90 on the road into town and slowed down in the parking lot between the hospital and the office building. I rushed inside. Mia was lying on a table in the exam room. The doctor was taking her blood pressure. When I opened the door, I immediately realized that the doctor looked worried and maybe even a little stressed. My wife looked completely calm. I hurried over to her and took her hand. She looked at me coldly and said, "Hello, dear. Did you deliver their cocktail on time?" Dr. Campbell cleared her throat. "Mr. Goodwin, your wife had a miscarriage. There's nothing wrong with her. There's no bleeding. I've scheduled her for a C-section by 5 p.m. to clean it out and prevent infection." All I heard was that our baby was gone. I wondered where he was. I was suddenly numb, and at the same time, relieved that my wife wasn't hurt. Surprisingly, she didn't seem bothered by this loss. It should have been a warning, but I missed it. Mia. It's been 3 months since. that day, and I don't know who I am. I think the perfect little creature in the frying pan ate me, grew around me, took my shape, filled my skin. What I used to believe, I don't know. What I loved, I'm not sure. The people I knew, I'm not sure they exist. Noah was shattered at first. 10 times a day, he asked me if I wanted to talk about it. I didn't want to. Several times I walked in on him as he sobbed alone. He admitted that the loss made him suffer like he had never suffered before. Then he stopped letting me see it. He would get up and leave the room, his tears still dripping onto the carpet. He stopped asking for me. Yesterday, he found me in the backyard sitting on the grass looking at the blades of grass. He asked if I wanted to talk about it. I don't want to think about it, I replied. But I did think about it. All the damn time. Lawson. A minute. I was one of the first customers through the door when Goodwin's opened 4 years ago. I always had a list in my pocket of random things to buy for the ranch, our house, the kids, the pets. Noah and Mia had a good idea, probably because they grew up here. If you needed a crane washer or a gallon of latex or bird food, you could order them online and wait 2 or 3 days for the truck to arrive from Connor City. Or you could go to one of the chain lumber or hardware stores in this metropolis and spend 10 times as much on gasoline as you did on the part you needed that very damn minute. Plus, spend the better part of a day doing it. Or you could, now you did, go to a new store and buy what you needed from Mia and Noah. Of course, you paid a small markup. But you could talk to the owners, socialize with other shoppers, and drink a cold Coke from the vending machine in the lobby. I had known Noah and Mia since they were in elementary school. They were about 10 years younger than Betsy and me. Betsy had sat with Mia a few times in her senior year of high school. When I came back to the valley after college to work on the family ranch, preparing to take it over so my parents could retire, I met Betsy again. We'd been friends in high school, but we'd never met. I was constantly working. Gathered, baled, and stacked hay. Cleaning the feedlot. Moving herds to winter pasture and then back again in 6 months. Cut calves, branded them, castrated them. Repaired tractors, grain augers, balers, combines. Yeah, I never had much time for extracurricular activities. We met again when our alma mater was playing our old rival under the Friday night lights. She and 2 friends sat next to me on the cold aluminum bleachers. The last time I'd seen her, she'd been almost beautiful. Now she had blossomed. The last time I'd seen her, I hadn't had the courage to ask her directly if she'd been kidnapped. That night I was in love. We were married almost a year later. Our first child came a year after that. We made time to go to football games. Old friends who had not yet left town would gather in the stands and visit us. It was a weekly reunion, with new faces and new spouses. Noah was a halfback. And a halfback. In a school with a small student body, some kids had to play 2 positions, just like in the old days. It would have been very American if Mia had been a cheerleader, but she played clarinet in the little cheerleading band that shuttled around the field at halftime. "Hey, Noah," I called out from the other end of the store. "Do you have any twine? You know, real biodegradable twine, not plastic." He didn't hear me. I knew he could hear me. I walked over to him and touched his arm. He jumped up. "Oh, I'm sorry. What?" he said. "Twine?" he pointed. "4th aisle, about halfway down." We looked at each other. Since that horrible day in our bathroom, I've been trying to enlighten myself. I have found that support for women who have had a miscarriage is, to this day, inferior to support for women who have lost a baby or babies. And support for men whose women had experienced miscarriage was thin and ragged. Just get over it. Be a man. Betsy. Lo got the message at 3 in the morning. Something had happened at the feedlot. I got up at 4 and made coffee for his return, but he texted me that he wouldn't be home until at least lunchtime. I made sure to get a good coffee maker for the office at the feedlot, so I knew he would get his morning cup. The sun came up clear, crisp, and cold. I drank my coffee and took a very long look out the window at the old house and grounds. From here, when the air was clear as it is now and the sun was bright as it is now, I could make out a tiny white marker. Loa came home looking exhausted, kissed me, and lay down while I started dinner. I found him asleep, with his clothes on, no boots on, over a blanket. He was lying on his back and breathing with relief. He never snored. It was one of the things I liked about him, but I never knew why exactly. He was sleeping a deep sleep, and I should have let him continue. Instead, I walked over to him. "Please, Loa," I begged. I climbed onto the bed and hugged him. "I love you, Mr. Riley," I whispered. He laughed. "I love you too, Mrs. Riley." He fell asleep and I snuggled against him. That horrible day, they left me overnight to clean me up and make sure the bleeding stopped. They gave me some Jell-O and antibiotics that wrecked my digestive system for a few days. Loa drove me home. He stopped the truck next to what he called the old house, the first structure his great-grandparents built when they developed the ranch. It was a tiny one-bedroom house, long dilapidated, that we used for a guest house and general storage. We kept it because of sentimental value, and for a burial ground. We called it the grounds. A dozen Rileys rested here. The dates on the stones told their stories. Riley died in the prime of life. Riley lived to a ripe old age. Riley was taken as an infant. There was a new pit. It was small but deep, behind a pile of dirt and rocks with a shovel stuck in it. Next to the pit was a wooden box. I recognized it. Our daughter's antique toy box. Nothing valuable, just something sturdy and useful, passed down through several generations of young Rileys. Until now. We got out of the car and stood by the box. Lo didn't need to speak. I knew what he did. I helped him lower the crate into the hole, and we took turns filling it with dirt. From the remaining boards, he made a small white cross. It didn't have any inscriptions on it. We still hadn't decided what to call it. Holding hands side by side, we pressed it into the ground. Noah. My relationship with Mia changed after we lost the baby. It's weird, actually. She hadn't gone back to normal. She was serious. It wasn't her. She was more intense, more demanding. I wanted my Mia back. Dr. Susan Campbell. On Monday, I examined Mia Goodwin. It had been 6 months since her miscarriage. Since then, I have scheduled her for a checkup every 2 months to monitor her health. Her anxiety level had not diminished over time. She sat on the exam table and tried to make small talk about their store, the weather, the traffic on Main Street. I noticed her hands were shaking. In the exam room, I pulled up her lab results. Calcium is a little low. Continue to take supplements. Also take vitamin D. I didn't test him today, but it never hurts to keep his levels normal. We'll test for it next time. Oh, and congratulations. She looked at me without any emotion. I was alarmed. You're pregnant, I said. I expected tears of happiness, or tears of laughter. I was expecting something. She just said, okay, and got dressed and left. Betsy. About once a week, I called Mia. We had our own little support group. 2 women who had come to grief. I always showed up with a bottle of wine and some kind of pastry. I'd tell her I was lonely. Maybe I was, even with 3 teenagers and a couple thousand head of cattle. I worried about her. Mia was one of those beacon people, always shining her smile like a beacon. She would guide her friends to her, no matter what the weather was like. These days, she was as sober as a judge. You'd never know she had teeth. Speaking of sober, we always finish the bottle. She's bigger than I am, and because of the difference in body weight, she was more tipsy at the end of our sessions. Today I talked about the quilt I was going to make. Of course, first I'd have to learn how to quilt, buy all the materials, whatever they are, and... Mia touched the wine bottle, stroking it with her fingertips and moving her lips as she read the text. It was as if she'd found something long lost. I took a glass from her sideboard. How much? I asked. She shook her head slightly. Probably not worth it. Her eyes said she should. She wanted to. Finally, she sighed, as if frustrated. I'm pregnant. I put down my glass and hugged her. Oh, Mia, that's wonderful. Noah must be over the moon. She was still in my arms. He doesn't know. I shuddered. Anxiety instantly turned to fear. Lawson. I had to wait until after dinner to leave her alone again. Once the kids went to their rooms to finish their homework, I grabbed a beer and sat at the table with Betsy across from me. He doesn't know? She shook her head. That's what she said as of today anyway. I must have had a transparent look on my face. That's why I'd never been good at poker. Don't go to Noah's, Betsy said sternly. I held up my hands. Don't even think about it. Our eyes met. You would have told me, I sort of asked. She smiled, but her trembling biceps gave her away. Under the table, she clenched her fists. Mia, maybe I'll stop by Connor City. There are 2 tattoo parlors there. I'll get a skull and wings, and then I'll put horns on it, and tribal sleeves. They say you can't get tattoos when you're pregnant, but I think I'm going to get one. Noah watches me. I catch him a lot. He's not secretive. I can see his eyes through the shelves in the store. I ignore him. What the hell does he want from me? Noah. 9 weeks later, it happened again. We were home late at night, watching a cooking show, sitting on the same couch but on different ends. We were also waiting for each other. In the last few weeks, if I went to bed first, Mia would follow me and test my cardiovascular system. If she went to bed first, I would watch TV for an hour or so and then head to the guest room to sleep. It worked out that on average I was rested every other night. I could probably keep up that pace without passing out. One night she went to the bathroom and sat there for half of a series of Drain imprint cookies. She came back and sat down. I thought she looked pale. I turned on the lamp. She was definitely pale. I didn't bother to ask why. I knew she wouldn't answer me directly. When that truth hit me, I wanted to cry. I did cry when I went to the bathroom and found traces of blood on the floor and toilet seat, smeared when she cleaned them up with a towel I found in the laundry basket. I stepped out and stood between her and the cooking show. The judges were scoring and Mia was clearly angry that I was blocking her view. She looked at me and shrugged. Lost it. I sighed. What? Blushed. Betsy. This was a first. I got a call from Dr. Campbell's office asking me to come in. The manager of the doctor's office heard the surprise bordering on panic in my voice and quickly assured me that everything was fine. The doctor just wanted to visit me. Visit? I was only partially reassured. I'd never been to a doctor's appointment before. Dr. Campbell took me to her office, not the exam room. I hoped it was good news. Unless I had an inoperable tumor. Oh no. Did I really have an inoperable tumor? I sat up, wildly and frighteningly unsettled. Betsy, I need to talk about some personal things. About our friend, Mia Goodwin. I recoiled, remembering that the doctor referred to Mia as his friend, not his patient, and called me by my first name, something she'd never done before. Doctor? She raised her hand. Please call me Susan. Okay, I said warily. Doc, okay, Susan. She clasped her hands together. That's delicate. I'm violating patient confidentiality, but I'm very concerned about Mia. Can we keep this conversation between us? Of course. I know you and Mia are close. You must have noticed how she's changed lately. Yes, lost 2 babies. Susan nodded and looked at me. Lost 1 baby. Had I changed? Could she notice it? She must see me blush. The hospital in Connor City runs rural outreach programs in many areas. They're going to send us a psychotherapy nurse every other Wednesday to do group and individual sessions on topics like smoking cessation, weight loss, and coping with the loss of a child. The doctor double-tapped me. Sounds not bad, I agreed. I mentioned it to Mia the last time she visited us, but she wasn't interested. She said she was fine, that she didn't need anyone to tell her she wasn't. You want me to talk her into going? Susan smiled a sly smile, The kind of smile you never want to see from your family doctor. Not really. Lawson. I knew he'd be at work. Sure enough, he was mixing gallons of paint for my friend. We talked about beef prices on the hoof and at the butcher shop until his purchase was finalized and he left. I nodded to Noah. She's gone. Or, they left. He glanced at the big clock and sat down on the metal half bench next to the paint mixing machine. Please tell Betsy how grateful I am to you, Lawson. I will. Betsy came home from her appointment with Dr. Campbell and told me about their scheme. It was actually the doctor's own, but my wife immediately agreed. Mia wouldn't go to therapy to save herself, but she might go to save her friend. Betsy visited Mia and told her about the nurse. Mia replied that she had heard about it, and it was none of her business. Mia, Betsy said, you're strong. You don't need help. I do. Here she began to cry, and though it was all an act, and a pretty good one at that, the tears were real. I'm letting Lou down. If this keeps up, he's going to leave me. I know it. Mia's eyes widened. But he loves you. That's not enough, Betsy sobbed. I hurt him every day. I need help, and I'm not brave enough to do it alone. So after coaxing her friend some more, Mia agreed to go to sessions with her, hold her hand, and help her overcome her shyness. I had the bad manners to giggle when I heard this story, but I quickly shut my mouth. I'm sorry, dear. I didn't mean to take it lightly. But I had to smile. I moved over to her and hugged her. It's just that you're the bravest and toughest woman I've ever met. It's Mia who has to be the timid one. Betsy nodded, pressing herself against my shoulder. I used to think so. And now, it's like she's a different person. Every time I see her, she becomes someone else. And some of them, she added quietly, I don't really like. Mia. Well, that was a blow to the head. The nurse is a guy. John, I don't remember the last name. It's on the sheet he handed over. He's just a handsome guy. Dark wavy hair, big sensual lips, broad shoulders, eyes as black as night. When he looks at me, I get goosebumps. It's my kind of therapy. We sit in a circle. Me, Betsy, Mary Jane Walker, Jennifer Gomez. Mary Jane's son drowned in the pool last year. He hadn't learned to swim or even swim and was left in the backyard alone. 4 years old. Jennifer's daughter died of an aggressive cancer. Her husband left the next day. God, what a bunch of crybabies. I noticed the way they looked at me when I had to tell my story, which I did when it was my turn, even though I was only there to support Betsy. I told them it was no big deal. It's life. Perhaps it was an insensitive statement, though in retrospect I found it funny. They all wept except John. He understands. Noah. When I got home, she was still awake. I'd stayed up late at the store doing a completely unnecessary inventory of key blanks. I couldn't decide whether I should be there for her when she returned from therapy or let her be alone. Eventually, my cowardice took over. She was sitting at the dining room table with her laptop. I kissed the top of her head, waiting for her reaction. Whatever she did would tell me my next move. She ignored me. I went to the bedroom and got into bed. I lay there waiting for her to come in and pounce on me. But instead, I heard her go into the guest room. The door closed tightly. For the next few hours, the house was quiet. I couldn't sleep. She was gone. Lawson. A man? That was, what? Sexist? Maybe. Men can be nurses. Women can be doctors. It's just an old ingrained reaction to think that a nurse is likely to be a woman. How? I wanted to say, how is he? Which was tantamount to asking how therapy went, which was tantamount to asking if she was cured. I prudently didn't pursue that line of questioning further. Yes. John. I forgot his last name. It's on the handout. Just moved here from California. Mrs. Walker was there, and Mrs. Gomez. You remember them. So sad. I nodded. Sad. How did Mia react? Did she understand everything? Betsy smiled. No, it's like she got me there on her own, not the other way around. She and John seemed to hit it off right away. We had a few discussions and did some exercises. She was very enthusiastic. I think this will be good for her. I stood leaning against the kitchen counter, beer in hand. At that moment, I didn't care if it did any good for Mia, or Miss Walker and Gomez. I broke my resolve. What about you? Law, she said quietly. Don't ask, please? Okay. She looked at me for a long moment. I looked at her again, my face impassive. Husband? Yes, my wife. Will you take me to bed, hold me, and make me believe you'll never leave me? I nodded. I could, I wanted to, and I did it. Noah. On those nights when Mia was in therapy, I made myself a rum and coke and went to bed early. There was no chance of her joining me. We hadn't had anything since she started going to group. I had long ago stopped asking her to share with me, to tell me how she was feeling, what she was thinking. The hell with it. She had a professional helping her now. And I was on the sidelines, an amateur, a pickup artist who just happened to love her. Not only did she not share with me, but she barely spoke to me. At home, just grunts. At the store, she talked to customers and other employees, but never said a word to me directly. To hell with it. That night, I drank 2 rum and cokes like a savage and fell asleep easily. The front door slammed. I woke up and looked at the clock. 3:15 in the morning? I walked into the front room and found Mia there, swaying and clearly drunk. Where have you been? Said I. I should have yelled, but I suddenly felt the time for such emotions had come and gone. She smiled at me. It was a smirk, really. It was a smirk that said you no longer mattered to me. Then she walked away. I heard her get in her car and drive away. Mia. John was flirting with me from the beginning. I saw him shoot his eyes at me in group when he thought he could get away with it. In individual sessions, he would sit very close to me and touch my arm to emphasize his point. He would try to help me and seduce me, but I didn't want that kind of help. All I could think about was how to get Noah to stop wanting to keep me. I shut myself off from him, from talking, from everything, and he was still making puppy dog faces at me. I need to be replaced. He just doesn't get it. He thinks he loves me, like that's going to do anything. I can't do anything bad to this guy. I have to do something unforgivable. Next chapter. John thought he convinced me to get in his car and drive to a small motel outside of town. Actually, I was the one who convinced him. He was so ready to admit his mastery of seduction that he didn't notice my part. He practically dragged me into the room, and in a moment of, "You bastard! It's all your fault!" screamed I as he tried to pull away from me. "Screw you! Screw you!" I yelled. "You crazy bitch!" he yelled. I grabbed my clothes and ran out the door. You crazy bitch! He really did have a limited vocabulary for a therapist. I started laughing. I couldn't contain my laughter and started laughing so hard I was sobbing. The examiner called me crazy. It was official. Mia. After walking from the motel to the hospital parking lot, I was finally back in the place I still called home. A few cars drove by and honked, recognizing me. And there was a lot of irony in that because I didn't recognize myself. I made it to the house and waited for Noah to come out. Reliable old Noah asked where I'd been. Asked as if he really cared. You should have seen the look on his face when I told him his little wifey had been outside having fun. That should have done it for us. I left that house for good and went to live with my sister, Betsy. I stood there with my mouth open like an idiot. What? I could see that Noah was uncomfortable remembering and repeating her words, and I felt like a horrible person for asking him. But I couldn't believe what he'd just said. Damn! Because you don't take a hint! That's exactly what she said. I still couldn't believe it. My quiet girlfriend Mia, the only truly innocent and good woman I'd ever known, This one? Where did she go? He made a motion with his head. To her sisters. June sent me a message that Mia is with her and safe. He sighed. I haven't heard a word from Mia. You should go and talk to her, Noah, I said. I think she's said all she has to say. His face wrinkled with despair. She hates me, Betsy. She hates me. Why else would she do this to me? I went over to him and put my arms around him, and he sobbed like a little baby. I stroked his back and wondered if Lo had ever cried like that for me. And who would come to hold him? Lawson. To hell with Einstein. Time runs the same whether you're happy or sad. It can't be stopped or slowed down. And no matter how much you scream and cry, you can't make it go backwards if you screw up. It's been a month since Betsy started home therapy. She goes to group sessions every week, even though Mia has opted out. Mia lives at her sister's house. Her sister June is single and single-handedly raising 2 teenagers. It's none of my business, but June has always struck me as a balanced person, not inclined to push good men away. On the other hand, she moved here after living in Arizona, where she married and divorced, so I never knew her husband. Maybe he wasn't a good man. I hope June can provide stability for Mia. She doesn't seem to be able to find it anywhere else. Noah is working at the store as usual. I've noticed he's there every minute any day they're open. Mia stopped working there. I guess that means they don't see each other and hardly talk. Not talking is not a good thing. Betsy. Mia isn't answering my calls or texts. I don't know if that means she's hiding from the world or just me. Maybe I'm reminding her about therapy, which reminds her of what happened to her, that she needs therapy. Speaking of which, she really needs it and isn't getting it. I can't help but feel partly responsible for that. My personal therapy sessions in the bedroom continue. Noah. She doesn't show up for work. I think I knew she wouldn't come. It's not that she's not getting paid, after all. I just want her to talk to me. To say that it's over between us. End it. If that's what she wants. Just put me out of my misery. Old horses are put to sleep when they can't handle the pain. I don't know if horses feel that kind of pain. I hope not. My days are shit. I wake up and expect her to be right next to me. Walking into the office at work, I expect her to be sitting at our desk. All day long, I walk around expecting to see her, hear her voice, feel her hand on my arm. Today became especially dark about an hour ago. I can't see anything in front of me. I can't smell or taste anything. I only breathe because it doesn't require my permission. I've been hiding in the back shed with building materials since I got the call. I didn't recognize the number or the voice. Noah, she said. This is Dr. Campbell. Are you alone? I shuddered. I felt my spinal column clench. Not exactly. Why? Get some privacy somewhere, and don't call me by my name until you do. I got a bad feeling. I walked out the back door. Okay. I could sense her apprehension. We never had this conversation, she said. Do you understand? Why? I practically screamed into the phone. Is it Mia? What's wrong? Do you understand? I could lose my license over this. I need you to promise me you won't tell anyone about our conversation. A chill hit me. I collapsed onto a stack of cinder blocks. Okay, I promise. She paused, as if mulling it all over. Noah, Mia's scheduled herself for tubal ligation surgery. I know what it is, I said frantically. You can't do that. I had nothing to do with it, Noah. Believe me. She'll be seeing a surgeon in Connor City in 2 weeks. I only found out about it because they requested her medical records. She's never spoken to me. I couldn't form words. I made some sounds that sounded like words, but they weren't words. After a while, Dr. Campbell said, I got her notes from the therapy sessions. Again, please don't ever tell anyone that I told you this. I made an affirmative sound. Mia suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. As we know, she is going through personality changes. Many women who have miscarriages suffer from this. In Mia's case, it's especially severe. You have to stop her. There's nothing I can do, Noah. It's up to you. Noah. I was hyperventilating. I was dizzy. At the office, I typed PTSD and miscarriage into a search engine. The results were like an account of my life with Mia lately. Stress, depression, anxiety, waking up screaming from nightmares she refused to describe. Now I knew. Guilt swept over me like a gust of wind. She had to endure the changes in her body, the stretching of internal tissues, the rush of hormones, and all by herself. I couldn't help her then. I couldn't help her now. I jumped up, ran to the bathroom, and threw up my lunch, barely making it to the toilet. My life was shit, and I felt like shit. But I knew what to do next. Betsy, once a month I pick flowers from our garden. I also stop on back roads and cut the prettiest wildflowers by the drainage ditches. I take the bouquets to the burial sites and make a fresh arrangement over each grave. Lo stayed up late last night. He didn't need to. The kids were safely in their rooms when I kissed him on lips full of promise. He kissed me back, told me he loved me, said he needed to finish his loan application and not to wait for him. I feel like I'm back to square one. I always wondered what that phrase meant. Now I know exactly what it feels like. I cried myself to sleep. I looked at the loan application when he brought it home from the bank. It was due in 2 weeks. When I'm done with each grave, I talk to the person. Just in case. I hope you like these peonies, Grandpa Daniel. I found them on Prescott Lane, Emily. I don't know what they are, but aren't they pretty? The smallest resident is Floyd Lee Riley, who left this world in 1932, at the age of 3 years and 2 months. Good morning, Floyd Lee. I looked up from Floyd Lee's old granite stone to the new white cross. Hope you're looking after your little... I stood still for a long moment. Something wasn't right. Noah. He lived in a single house by the river in the northernmost part of the valley. The road leading to his trailer was 2 ruts that rarely seemed to be used. His truck and motorcycle were parked under a shed, so I knew he was home. I stopped the car and waited to let him know I had arrived. I knew how many guns he had. Bradley Malone was one of the bright spots. He was smart, handsome, strong, and fast. He was the quarterback, our star, our leader. I got to know him pretty well in the process of hitting him a few hundred times during football practice. He hated being tackled and was hard to bring down. He was a fighter. Nothing could beat Bradley. Bradley was supposed to go to a small college and become a star. He got married, not to the head cheerleader, but to Leah, one of the people who spun the baton. He should have gotten a job and moved in with her. Instead, he went into the Marines. His father had been a Marine, and his grandfather had been a Marine. It was simply a Malone obligation. Bradley expected to serve and then come home and finish living the life of his dreams. But that didn't happen. Things went wrong in the desert. He came back safe and sound, no visible wounds. But he started drinking. He'd never been much of a drinker. At the illegal parties after our games, he'd have 2 beers at most. He started fighting. He was always a mild, reflective guy, exerting a calming influence on our more rowdy friends. He and his wife had 2 daughters. They had a big house in Connor City where Bradley got a job at an auto parts store. One day he left them and moved back to the valley, into this old, dilapidated trailer. He told me about it one day right after he arrived. He had ordered some sheets of corrugated tin. I saw his name on the screen and went to get them myself. He looked good, lean and muscular, tidy and well-groomed. It was his eyes that bothered me. They never stayed in one place for long. He handed me a Coke. He'd stopped drinking. He'd been diagnosed with PTSD, and after some incident he hadn't told me about at the time, he'd decided it would be better for his young family if he left their home. Today he stepped out of the trailer onto the unpainted wooden steps and raised his hand. He was dressed in jeans, a black t-shirt, and red Crocs. clean-shaven, his hair short and neat. Sit down. I got out of the car and pulled my offering from the trunk. Cherry Coke, he said, accepting the package from me. Thanks. Nice shoes, I said. He pushed the soda aside to look down. If your feet aren't comfortable, your soul isn't comfortable either. I laughed. No kidding, he said. You must stand in the store all day. Do you have insoles? I shook my head. Well, go to an orthopedist and get them. They'll change your life. An orthopedist? Yeah. I go to mine once a year. And a dermatologist. And last month I had my first colonoscopy. I also check my blood pressure in the morning. I brush my teeth twice a year. Any other questions? He had a patio set up under an awning, 3 folding chairs covered in cobwebs, an old grill, and a wooden table with wire coils. He went inside and came out with 2 glasses. We sat down and poured iced drinks. Moving on, he said, as we touched the glasses. Manicures twice a month, deep tissue massage 4 times a year. I'm fascinated, I said. People see me getting manicures and they look at me like that. You know? When I was in high school, I would have done anything in the world not to be looked at like that. When I was in the Marines, we busted our asses keeping you macho, so no one would ever dare look at you like that. Now I don't care what anybody else thinks. I'm doing what's best for me. I didn't bother asking the next question. He sighed and answered anyway. I'm doing fine. One of the reasons I try to take care of my body is I feel like it's the only thing I can control. But my brain? Totally out of my control. Therapy? Yes, twice a month, once with my wife, once alone. Why? You want to join too? I paused. Maybe. He finally focused on me. He'd already told me that this evil that engulfed him made him less aware of his surroundings and at the same time sharper in his understanding. He felt like there were 2 different entities in his skull fighting for dominance. What's going on? He asked. You didn't come all this way to drink cherry cola. I told him the whole story. He kept saying, damn, damn, damn. He also said, Mia? And then, this Mia? Our Mia? And then a few more damn. When I was done, he opened another soda and filled our glasses. You came because it's... He pointed his thumb at his head. I shrugged. Sorry. Don't be. I'd help you if I could. You can't? I take that back, he said. I'll try to help you, but from what I've seen and read, everyone reacts differently to this thing. Mia could be on the other side of my planet. Do you understand? I nodded. But what would you do? You mean I'd want Leah to know? I guess so. I'd want her to know to just step aside. That this has nothing to do with her or my love for her. I wish she'd stay out of it rather than let me drag her into my own pile of shit. But it's hard not to take it personally, you know? I accept it, I said. Because I did. I told her some things that came from somewhere outside my mind. Too bad she didn't know that. Maybe they wouldn't have hurt so much. It probably would have hurt anyway, but... He raised his glass and looked at the setting sun through the cube. Last time I was home, I woke up in the middle of the night with my hands on her throat. The crickets in the sage started their nightly chorus, shrill and furious. And here I am, telling you what to do. You didn't tell me, I said. His eyes were moist. Just love her, protect her, even from herself, mostly from herself. Lawson. And Betsy found me when I was trying to clear a clog in an irrigation pipe. She jumped off the truck and handed me a bottle of ice water. She pulled a folded piece of paper out of her pocket. Take a look at this list, she said. Her eyes stared intently at me. Some kind of passion swept over her. I unfolded the paper. Huh? Noah. June answered my knock, looking a little scared. Noy, she's not... I brushed past her. Mia was in the kitchen, stirring a pot on the stove. She looked up, embarrassed, and dropped her spoon. Before she could say anything, I grabbed her ass and hoisted her onto my shoulder. Noah, stop! God damn it! Put me down! She started punching me with her fists and trying to kick me, but she was tiny and couldn't dodge. See you, June, I said as I walked out. Noah, said June worriedly, but I turned to her and smiled. She nodded and held the door open for me. We're going home, I said to the world. Mia. Damn, Noah just barged in and kidnapped me. He threw me into the car and grabbed me by the collar of my shirt to keep me in the seat. I tried to punch him, but he has long, strong arms and I couldn't reach him. Lawson. They poured a small pad of concrete, maybe 18 inches per side, and leveled the lower granite slab on the dirt. It hardened for a while, then they smoothed out the mix and made it look level. Betsy prepared lunch for all of us, and the two of them walked across the street to our table. After an hour of eating and small talk, they decided they were ready for the last step. Just then we got word that the cow was in labor and the calf was injured and stuck. The boys were to pull it out, which is never an easy operation. Betsy read the message and whispered to me, "Come on." I hesitated, and she put a hand on my shoulder. "It's okay." Betsy. I watched the rest of the installation. There was a hole in the lower granite rectangle. Into this hole they inserted a short steel rod secured with a sharp-smelling epoxy that they had also smeared on the lower stone. They then carefully lifted the top stone, which had a corresponding hole drilled in its base, onto the rod. They smoothed off the excess epoxy, gathered their tools, muttered condolences, shook my hand, and left. Saturday, I sank to the ground in front of the new addition to the Riley property. Riverly Riley. We will love you forever. Riverly, I said, I will never forget you. I'm sorry I never got to hold you and feed you on my chest. I'm sorry that I will never know you. Please forgive me for not having the strength to carry you to the end. I put my head in my hands and sobbed. I want to give you more brothers and sisters, Riverly. I want to. Please help me. Please let me go. I will always remember you. Please let me go. I sat there for a long time. Loa drove up in his car and hurried over to me. He stopped at the stone and read the inscription, then brought his fingers to his lips and wrote out the name. He lowered himself down beside me, put his arms around me, and started crying like a baby. Mia, it was just crazy. Noah didn't go to the store anymore. He stayed in the house with me, in the same room with me. When I went to the bathroom, he was standing outside. The window was boarded up. He boarded up the windows in both bathrooms himself. He was never more than 6 feet away from me. We slept together, but hadn't done it since that one glorious time. He kept one hand on me while we slept, or rather when I slept. I never caught him sleeping. Funny, he used to sleep soundly. Now it was like he couldn't relax at all. He looked about 10 years older. One time he locked me in the bedroom. He put in a new bolt that only opened from the outside. Then he screwed plywood to both windows from the outside. I had to turn on the light, and I realized that this was the day I had an appointment in Connor City. I guess I still wanted to go, but I couldn't. I turned off the light and stretched out on the bed watching TV. Was it love? Noah. The mania came and went. Her depression would deepen and then disappear. I had to fight her off, all the while remembering what Bradley had told me. It wasn't personal. When she hated, it wasn't directed at me. When she withdrew into herself and sat silently rocking for hours, it had nothing to do with me. When she wanted to have fun, unfortunately, it wasn't me she wanted to have fun with. Not me, anyway. The latter was the hardest thing not to take personally. I called the therapist Bradley had been seeing and begged to see her. Mia. I'm not going to voluntarily see another damn therapist while I'm alive, and Noah had to drag me to the car. I yelled at him all the way to Connor City. We walked into Dr. Florence Wynn's office as if I'd been arrested. Noah held my hand tightly. He led me over to a chair and forcibly sat me in it. Dr. Wynn looked somewhat stunned. Mrs. Goodwin, you are... Mr. Goodwin, did you force your wife to come today? You bet I did. Noah replied angrily. Mrs. Goodwin, I'm legally obligated to ask about it. Do you want me to call the authorities? No. I want you to leave me alone. The doctor just stared at me. Obviously, I was out of it. She asked Noah to tell her what led up to that moment. He continued the story about my busted ass. Mia, she asked suddenly, what do you want to get out of our sessions? Oh, are we on a first-name basis now? I got even more pissed off. I want to get rid of him, I said, pointing at Noah. He looked like I'd kicked him in the balls. Why? She asked. I looked her straight in the eye, ignoring him. He wants a big family, and I can never do that. I want him to give up on me and let me go so he can have what he wants. There was silence in the room for a while. Noah stared into the void. Noah, she said. He cleared his throat, his eyes glittering. I want the old Mia back, the one I married. She made a mental note. Have you had anything since the day you brought her home? I chuckled and she glared at me. Brought her home? Damn, she'd tied me up. Kidnapped me while I was making risotto. No. Why not? She pressed. You did the manly thing and reclaimed her by force. Why not continue to reclaim your territory? I realized from the look on Noah's face that she'd hit his battleship. Because when I look at her, all I can think about is the other guy inside her. Dr. Wynne didn't back down. She never told you who her affair partner was. Doesn't the anonymity make it easier for you two to shed that image? I loved her description. An agonizing 10 minutes with this horrible creep was an affair. It sounded almost classy. Hell no, Noah was on the verge of screaming. She broke our vows. She had fun with another man, for God's sake. How can I forget that? Did she ever tell you why she did it? He shook his head. Mia? I shook my head. We already know why, don't we? She said. I leaned forward, unwillingly myself. Noah's eyes widened, and he looked at the doctor. She just told us. Mia has been having fun with another man in an attempt to destroy your love for her. She has already admitted that. She wants you to leave her, but believes you will never do so unless you have a good reason. Her cheating should have been that good reason, but you didn't cooperate. You can say that again. Now the doctor was getting her paycheck. She closed the notebook and set it aside, then turned to both of us. Our time is up today, she said, and so I want to leave you two with some painful thoughts. Your relationship, your marriage, is in a terrible state. I give you about a 50% chance of recovery. Mia, you've been through 2 tragedies, and your reaction to those losses is destroying Noah. Noah, you're doing the right thing by following Bradley's advice, but you can't keep your heart on fire for long. You love each other too much to break up so easily. You can't keep your eye on Mia forever. She'll get out eventually. And then what if she finds another lover? And another? There will come a point when you'll hate her. It's hard to think about it now, but I've seen it happen over and over again. Mia, I'm more worried about you. Let me be frank. Right now, Noah is the only being in this world standing between you and a destructive future of chemical abuse, one-night stands, and short, unsatisfying relationships while you try to deal with the changes that have happened to you on your own. Post-traumatic stress changes your internal structure and brain chemistry. You are literally no longer the Mia that Noah wants back. Will you ever be able to be her? That's up to you. I can treat you in many ways, including with the latest drugs. But I can't make you. Even Noah can't make you, no matter how hard he tries. If Mia wants to come back, she has to be willing to fight. Mia. I managed to take the cap off the bottle and guide my hand to the garbage disposal switch before Noah grabbed me. For lack of a more noble word, yes, he grabbed me. Wrapped his arms around my waist and threw me to the floor. The pills went flying everywhere, falling around us like hailstones. I ended up on my back, and Noah ended up on top of me. He was angry and breathing hard. He picked up a pill from the floor. It worked. Damn it. I reflexively swallowed, and the pill ended up in my stomach. "Did you take it?" he shouted. I screamed into his hand. "I have all day." I was exhausted. I just nodded. He helped me up and brought a glass of water to my lips. I took a big gulp and wondered if I should spit it out at him. But I didn't. He picked me up in his arms like a child and carried me to the couch. He continued watching the movie. I fell asleep immediately, snuggled up against him. Noah. Our schedule became wake up, eat, distracted, eat, pop a pill, distracted, eat, sleep. Repeat. Fortunately, I had 3 employees who could keep the store running without my guidance. It took a full 2 weeks before she stopped resisting and swallowed the pill without threat of being restrained. After that, another 2 weeks passed, and I noticed improvement. Her moods became less acrimonious. She only woke up screaming about every 3rd night. We had 2 more sessions with Dr. Wynn. Together, and then Mia was left alone. After making sure there were no open windows in the office, I sat outside the door for an hour. I was terribly afraid she would slip away from me and run away. To be sterilized or to be entertained by some stranger. Both thoughts were equally horrible. Sure, ultimately it was her body and her decision, but if I let her go under the knife in her mental state, it would be the end for us. If she ever comes back to me, she will regret it. She will blame me for letting it happen. If she never came back to me, if my old Mia never came back, then it didn't matter. She could and probably would leave and then do whatever she wanted with herself. Mia. When I woke up after taking the first pill, and by taking, I mean having it shoved into me without my permission, it felt like I was underwater. The air seemed thick, and the light around me was warped. It reminded me of swimming at the bottom of a pool as a child, when I kept my eyes open and watched the legs kicking upward. Sounds seemed muffled and drawn out. The smells and tastes were not the same. I imagined my head was encased in clear, unflavored jelly. But that obviated the desperate desire to hurt. To myself, Noah, or anyone else. Is that a fair exchange for numbness? Noah. Mia turned to me in the middle of watching an episode of Iron Chef and said quietly, "I'm sorry." Then she looked at the TV again. The next day, she was in the bathroom. I leaned against the door and heard her say, not to herself but to me, "I'm sorry." Every day she seemed intent on stopping what she was doing and telling me she was sorry. Last night we fell asleep side by side, facing each other. She reached out and touched my chest very gently. "Will you ever make love to me again?" she whispered. By the time I had an answer, she was already asleep. Next chapter. Mia had taken the pill 3 hours before, so the violent fit of shivering that gripped her was a surprise. I stepped away from the kitchen table, where I was chopping onions in preparation for dinner. "What's wrong?" snapped I. In retrospect, my tone was harsh. Something was wrong, and I was sure I looked like I didn't care. She stared at me. "You're not letting me go, damn it, but you're not taking me back either. I'm ready to fight for us, but you won't let me." "I'm sorry, Noah. I'm tired of asking for forgiveness over and over again. When will it ever be enough? When will it ever be enough?" I looked away. "It won't, will it?" she shouted. "I'll never be sorry enough, and you'll never let me go." She grabbed the pill bottle and threw it at my chest. It hurt. She started screaming. "Sorry is just words and words. Or crap, right? I could say sorry a million times, and it would still be shit." The kitchen suddenly became very quiet. Her voice became normal. It was calm, too calm. "I'm sorry." Her left hand rested on the cutting board, fingers spread apart. "I'm sorry." She repeated it not as a real statement, but more like a magical incantation. She opened a drawer and pulled out a cleaver. "I'm sorry." She raised the blade above her head and brought it down sharply on her hand. "Mia, I thought it would hurt. It really didn't." And at Noah, who stood frozen and amazed. Hell, I was stunned. Noah. I could have grabbed her hand, but it was too fast, too sudden. I yelled for her to hold onto the towel with my other hand, picked her up, and rushed to the car. Mia. The doctor and nurse were very excited about our arrival. They took the towel and held my hand so tightly it hurt. I thought it was strange that it was only now starting to hurt. They gave me a shot of some kind of anesthetic, and that's when it really started to hurt. It seemed counterintuitive, but I didn't think about it at the time. I put my head down and watched the world spin. The doctor asked where the missing piece was. Noah made a hilariously amazed face and rushed back out the door. Finally, I could get away from him. But the intriguing part of my brain was now painted over with this sedative as well. Most of my brain just didn't care. I closed my eyes. Betsy. I walked to therapy down the hallway leading from the parking lot and past the entrance to the emergency room. I looked into the emergency room and saw Mia on a gurney. Her left arm was a bulb of white gauze and blue tape that was horribly crimson. I gasped and ran inside. Noah was standing by the gurney, holding Mia's right arm. Someone had put an IV in her arm, and a blood oxygen monitor was attached to one of her fingers. Noah held her hand awkwardly, carefully, avoiding the monitor. "What's wrong?" I asked out of breath. Noah looked up at me. "She cut off her finger." "Oh. What happened?" "Ned." He looked at me in a way that made me realize I couldn't pronounce the word cat. "She cut herself. Her finger. Cut it off." "Oh." Mia opened her eyes and turned her face to me. Her pupils were dilated, and she didn't seem to recognize me. "They're waiting to take her to Connor City to sew it back on." I guessed he meant the missing piece and was about to say something when Mia's pupils narrowed to pinpoints, and she looked past me. I turned around. John walked into the emergency room. I saw it on his face. It was more than recognition. I looked at Noah, who was shifting his gaze from his wife to John. Noah's face became rigid, and he took a step toward John. "Noah. Son of a bitch, I should have known. I should have known. But until that second, it was just a guess." I walked through the emergency room toward the guy, and with every step I took, I was more and more certain. He raised his hands, whether for defense or for a fight, I couldn't tell. He stepped back. "Hey, she went over to..." Betsy. Of course. It had to be John. I realized it as soon as Noah headed toward him. Noah seemed to realize it too. He didn't make a sound. He just swung his right hand up and over John's arms in a high, perfect arc that ended with Noah's fist smashing into John's nose. The ambulance erupted with an echoing crack and the squelching sound of pressurized fluids leaking out. John fell back against the doors, which opened and let him tumble out into the hallway. Noah grabbed his arm and jumped around, grunting in pain. Several of his fingers were sticking out at unnatural angles. Mia watched it all with drooping eyelids, then closed her eyes and lay still. Lawson. I was sitting in the bleachers with other dads and a few moms watching our oldest son play Little League when I got a call from Betsy. "Lo," she said. "No therapy today." "Great," I said. "Wait, was that stupid? And how could I take it back in a hurry? Do you want to come over and watch the game?" "I can't," she said. "Mia's in the hospital and Noah just got arrested." "What the..." "Noah doesn't have the right lawyer for that. Can you call our guy and get a recommendation?" "How?" "I'm going to go to Connor City with Mia. They have to reattach her finger." "She's..." "Have a pizza," she said. "I love you. I've got to go. The ambulance is ready to go." "But I..." She passed out. Meanwhile, the other team had put 2 players in striking position. Noah. I sat in the county jail for 2 days. I had to meet with a new attorney, post bail, and get my broken fingers set. For this procedure, I was taken to the hospital again, but this time under the protection of a sheriff's deputy. He was an old high school friend who played center, so we spent time reminiscing. Except for when Dr. Campbell was setting my broken fingers, and I lost consciousness for a few minutes. For heaven's sake, Noah, hit them with a stick next time, she advised me. It was like there were sticks lying everywhere in the ER. The deputy gave me a ride home. I stood on the step and waved to him as he drove away. I didn't call her when I was in jail. I gave up. If Mia wanted to leave, I was tired of stopping her. Alone, I wasn't sure I could control her even if I wanted to. I stood in front of the door. Not a sound, just the distant muffled hum of tractors tilling the fields outside of town. The wind blew through the trees of my yard. I wondered if I could continue to live here alone. Would I be able to endure these memories? She opened the door. Her left hand was encased in green fiberglass covered with white cloth. She stepped sharply into me, nearly knocking me off the porch. I didn't go anywhere, she said into my chest. I've been on the pill every day. I swallowed hard and couldn't speak. We hugged tightly, her left arm out to the side, my right arm out to the side. Betsy. It was therapy night, but when I walked into the room, only John was there. A wide white ribbon crossed his nose and let down his lined eyes. He looked up at me as I entered. I didn't bother to sit down. After a while, he pointed to the empty chairs. Where is everyone? I wondered how intelligent men could be so forgetful. Well, I said, first of all, I want to thank you for what you've done for me. I think you've been a great help to me, and I really appreciate it. He didn't answer anything, so I continued. Mary Jane's husband won't let her come over anymore. Jennifer has a new girlfriend. They both feel they need counseling, but not from you. He didn't like this news. I'm not staying. I only came to thank you. I'm here because Lawson trusts me. At that moment, he could think of two things. One was that he wished he'd entertained me instead of Mia. The other was that my husband was right to trust me with himself because he would never want to entertain me. He would have gotten a fresh punch in the nose either way. He was wise enough not to voice them. I turned on my heels. I'd always wanted to do that. And walked away. Mia. The ambulance that took me to Connor City seemed empty, even though the EMT and driver were constantly chatting with each other. Noah should have been there. He'd always been there before. Even when I tried to chase him away, the stubborn son of a bitch wouldn't let me go. Now that I needed him, he was handcuffed and dragged away by sheriff's deputies. My sweet, gentle Noah smashed John's face in one blow. I shouldn't have been happy. I wasn't supposed to be impressed. I was being prepped for surgery. Shots, blood, urine, tests. It was just the last joint of one little finger, but they treated it like a heart transplant. The surgeon came in to talk to me before they put me under anesthesia. He went over his clipboard and assured me that this was a common case, and the chances of success were high. At the end, he turned the top page. Congratulations, by the way. A scary thought flashed through my mind. He looked at me questioningly. You didn't know you were pregnant? I don't know what he expected, but I know for sure he didn't expect me to grab his coat with my free hand, behind which IV tubes and monitor wires were frantically wriggling, and ask in a panic, "How far along are you?" He was taken aback, but like a professional, he took another look at the chart. About 4 weeks. He didn't ask why. Professional. I collapsed back onto the bed and cried with relief, joy, and horror. Mia. I had lost it. A fingertip. They had high hopes for me, but eventually it turned dark purple-black, and they removed it permanently. I keep it in the freezer. I looked online, and there are companies that remove the meat and make a necklace out of the bone. I think I might want to wear it as a reminder. I walked through the looking glass. Noah used to tail me, sticking close to me when I was in my madness. Now I follow him around like a kitten. I'm afraid to let him out of my sight. I know I threatened to run away from him. I couldn't survive if he ran away from me. Dr. Wynn had to change my medication to protect the baby. To protect the baby. I stood with the unopened vial in my hands, shivering with terror. The old pills were keeping me from getting out of this winding tunnel. I choked on one pill and went to bed. I woke up thinking I had to do something. I remembered. I needed to see if I was sane. Noah was asleep. I still loved him. The sun was rising. I still wanted to see it rise. The child inside me. There was a child inside me, and I felt almost the same as before. There were bruises and marks on my body. There were jagged edges and raw spots on my soul and brain. But I knew I could survive in this state. And I knew, absolutely knew why. The baby was putting happiness into my blood. Noah's baby was like Noah, generous and kind. He took care of me without even thinking about how to do it. We're going to make it work. Noah. It couldn't have been planned or calculated, but it worked out damn well. Mia was right. When I looked at her, I had visions of another man on top of her. The part of me that defines being a man said she cheated. That part absolutely hated her. She was trying to boss me around. The end. The love was over. The marriage was over. The other part of me said she was acting under the influence of a real disease. It wasn't my fault. Would I ever be able to trust her completely again? No. She was still sick. That monster could still rise up in her and destroy her, or it could lay dormant forever. I had to choose. Forgive, or follow the heat of jealousy and tear us apart. I will forgive, but I cannot forget. I will always keep her close, protect her, watch over her. But I've already promised to do that before all this, in sickness and in health, as far back as I can remember. Jealous thoughts or not, that can't change. But since the day she cut off her little finger, those jealous thoughts had faded to nothing. Now all I could see was her redness, droplets falling through the air in an unhealthy monochromatic rainbow. She infected me with her thoughts. With absolute certainty, I knew she loved me. Only me. Me forever. Lawson. The code of the West is much like the code of the playground. If the fight is fair, the loser has no claim. The man stood up and shut up. The district attorney threatened to see the world differently. He wanted to charge Noah with assault, but when Betsy swore that both men had raised their fists, his worldview began to lose support. He quickly dropped the charges. I thought I might have to have a conversation with John, what's his name, about making better choices in life. Well, a conversation wasn't quite accurate. It would have been more like a monologue. But I never got to say a word. He fled the state. I don't think his attacks on vulnerable patients were something he just started doing. A law firm in Connor City representing 2 hospitals agreed with me when I approached them. They are going to track him down and make sure that the appropriate board of whatever state he tries to practice in next is alerted. The other day I broke a hammer. It was an old hammer that I had used too hard and left unattended for too long. I decided to treat myself to a new one and went to town. In the tool department at the Goodwin store, I noticed movement in the gap between the shelves. Noah was kissing Mia, and Mia was very clearly showing it. I coughed politely. They pulled away from each other and smiled at me. Then they smiled at each other. I told you I've been researching a few things, and one of the interesting facts I've come across is that the chances of a successful live birth after 2 miscarriages are very high. But after 1, even if the mother is in her 40s? Okay, a little over. Don't tell my wife I said that. But the odds are still stacked against us. And we play the odds almost every night. I have high hopes. Like I said, what's broken can't be made new. We just tie up the broken ends and hope for the best. Mia. Every night I touch my belly and say, I love you, baby. Thank you for staying inside me one more day. Please stay one more night. Then I go to bed with Noah. Then I get out of bed and try to keep myself alive for my husband, for my baby, and for myself. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.